Okay, so don't mind the messy mat. I am going to be installing a 3DS capture card. Beautiful. I always tape it down just to make sure it stays in the right place when I am soldering. On this side, I need to line up the pins. As you can see underneath, there are the pads. That's when it's bad. And here we go, aligned. So I need to make sure I tape these down, make sure it's all lining up right, and we can get to it. Now it's all taped down. I always make sure to apply enough flux for consistency. Now, onto the fun part. Now that that's all done, what we need to do is clean up the pads. They need to be as flush as possible. Obviously, I will work further on this. I will be back when it's done. And all done. As you can hopefully see, they're pretty dang flush, which is what you want for good consistency. Now on to the next stage. Turn the soldering iron off for now. This one's fantastic since it's got a digital display. Cools down really quickly, heats up nice and quickly too. Also, after so many minutes of inactivity, it will shut off, which is a lifesaver. Now to put the board in a shell. Of course, we have to rearrange and make sure everything comes out, such as these ribbon cables. Use your trusty pliers. And yeah, in the circle pad back in, you have to feed it through the capture card, and then, if I can actually angle this properly, get it inside. It's very tough, so I'm going to have to use 2 hands. I'll be right back. Took way longer than I meant, but it's in. Finally, next step is to get the circle pad on properly. Always remember to put the ring back on, otherwise you're dang screwed. Place it down, and we can check and make sure it works. Next is get it down on the post. You'll know it works well if it sits rather flush. Like so. And there's no interruptions with the ribbon. No problems with the flex or anything, it's fantastic. Next job is to get all the screws in. Now that the screws are in, time for the ribbons. Repeat this for the rest of the system. Last but not least, and we're very nearly done. Make sure your soldering iron is on and ready. And now we solder these 2 wires to this fuse. And that's those done. Next is to get a USB connector in this spot. Without sticking it down, I need to cut around so it's this flush. It's all marked up. Now we're doing a little bit of cutting. Now that some basic cuts have been done, we will sand it down. And now it's in place. You need to hold down this ribbon connector so it doesn't get in the way of the next part of soldering. Trusty flux. Back again. Of course, because this is the separate type, these wires need to be connected. Now that the pads are all pre-tinned, time to get to the wiring. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Next up, we need to do a little bit of rearranging. Twist all the wires together, then place along the board so it will sit flush once closed. This may take a couple of attempts, but get it right and roughly should look like this. Next, we need to wire up again. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Next up, place them down on the board, like so. You take a couple of tries again, just to get it, make sure it's flush. And it should look something like this. All the wiring is now done. What we can do now is turn this off permanently. Now we've got a lot of shell cutting to do. First, you need to line up the inner casing, the USB connector. Mark it up just like the last time, and then cut straight up on each side. Once we've done that, we need to get rid of the plastic in the middle. It should look something along the lines of this. Next up, you need to make sure it fits properly on this part. See how much it covers up? Perfect. We now have to get rid of a significant amount of plastic along these lines here, going across, here, up, and around this area. Now we should be left with something similar to this. With the L&R ribbons in, let's test and make sure it sits flush. Perfect. With the battery placed back into the system, we can test and see if it works before finally closing it up. We've got power. I almost forgot. We need to place these back in. One here. However, this one won't go in properly. We need to trim it down. As you can see, it doesn't sit flush. So a little bit of trimming is needed and it'll be done. There we are. Now we can close it back up again. All 7 screws in place, including this one. Please remember to put the rubber feet on these screws here. Now comes the final part. Putting it together and testing to make sure this is cut right. Again, we need to mark it up and cut. We have to be very precise with this, as it can look pretty ugly if done wrong. Now that we have the bases done, we need to sand it off. And now, upon screwing these down, make sure not to go too tight, otherwise you could risk stripping the screws, and that is not good. We have the capture card. I know it looks a bit rough. However, you can see it, you can view it just the same. It works, it's fine. Make sure it fits in the system and is read by the computer. Open up the viewer software. Once you've entered the product key, you'll be left with this screen. Turn on the system. And there we go. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate the help and support. Take care.